the with regards to autoimmunity, for example, we know that that there is sort of a north to south gradient in terms of prevalence of autoimmune diseases. So the further up north that you live in the world, right? I mean, the northern latitudes, the higher the prevalence of autoimmune diseases is, and the further south, southern latitudes, the lower the incidence is or prevalence is, and it's been postulated that this relates to hygiene, right? And hygiene in the broadest sense, right? I mean, people being able, or kids when they're born, eating mud and eating, not eating, but being exposed to your environment and eating with dirty hands and all that protects you against autoimmunity. Whereas if you live in a super clean environment where everything is super clean, so to speak, and you are not exposed as frequently to pathogens or other substances in the environment, that makes you more predisposed to developing autoimmune diseases.
The immigrant nation, welcome one more beautiful day. We are so glad you chose to spend this time with us today. We are thrilled to welcome Dr. Pere Santamaria, founder of Perverse Therapeutics. Dr. Santamaria is at the forefront of groundbreaking research in autoimmune diseases, conditions where the body's immune system mistakenly attacks its own cells. His team has combined nanotechnology with immunological insights to develop a revolutionary approach that blocks harmful autoimmune responses without compromising the immune system's overall function. This innovation has shown remarkable promises in animal studies, and we're excited to learn more about its potential for transforming treatment in humans beings. Dr. Perez, welcome to the show, and please tell us, why did you choose this type of field, and what progress is exciting in this time in your life that you have made and you'd like to share with the public?
Yeah, I mean, so my story is, started, in science, really. I mean, what led me to be interested in science is when I was 15, when I turned 15 years old. So I was about to become an adolescent. I developed an autoimmune disease called myasthenia gravis. Myasthenia gravis is an autoimmune disease where the immune system attacks, nerve endings, and it creates some muscle weakness. In my case, it was on the eyes. I was seeing double. I couldn't lift my eyelids. It was a traumatic time for me and my family and my parents. I grew up in a humble family. It was hard for them to first to understand what was happening to me, and try to find the appropriate care. Of course, at that time, I had no idea what an autoimmune disease was, or all I knew is that I had to spend significant amounts of time in the doctor's offices and hospitals before I was diagnosed. And I was very interested. I was curious about, as I was growing up, about the things that surrounded me. I mean, I was curious about butterflies and insects and stuff like that. But I had no definitive path, career path ahead of me. And I was interested in sports. And now this thing happened, and it sort of changed my life. I had to stop playing sports. I was playing water polo at a high level. I had to stop doing that. Spending a lot of time in hospitals, as I mentioned, and not being able to go to school. At a period in my life where I wanted to do other things. I wanted to go and date girls. I wanted to go and party with my friends, and I couldn't do those things. And so, I think that affected the way I saw life, and I saw, you know, I, the things that interested me change. Then when I sort of started reading, and I became aware that there was an immune system, that we had an immune system, I became fascinated by that, and so I decided to study medicine. And I always wanted to do research. I do not know whether it was because of that disease or whether it was because of something else, but I wanted to do research. And I chose to, choose to do a medical specialty in clinical immunology, a PhD in immunology, and then, I found, myself going to the United States to do my postdoctoral training and so on and so forth. So, that's an answer to your question as to how did I get into that, and the reasons are sometimes sort of unclear to me, but I think that my disease affected somehow my choices in life. And so anyway, that's what was the second part of your question? Like,
I think you've already covered the second part of the question. I'm
okay.
gonna jump to the next one that I find is really personal. So you get sick, and out of your misery, your pain, and your commitment, and your family's commitment to find treatment, you found passion into solving a different problem for the world. When immigrant families are struggling with issues like health issues, or they're struggling with other things that may be emotional, spiritual, how do they, or in your example, how did you overcome that difficulty, and how did your family unit support each other for you to be able to find a different path?
I mean, I think it's a difficult question to answer. I mean, you find support in the people who love you. I mean, for me, I mean, for my family, my parents at that time, I remember seeing the anxiety and the pain in their eyes, and them being lost, not knowing what to do. But for me, I felt safe. I felt protected. I felt that things would be okay. I mean, I've always been an optimist, and in hindsight, I think my challenges and my shortcomings, and particularly in this case in health, made me a little stronger, more resilient. It's kind of I've experienced failure, and I know what failure feels like, and so I am not afraid of failing again, because I know it can be overcome. And so, to me, I mean, there was a troubling time in my life, and at that time it was extremely painful. But again, looking back, it has enabled me to be stronger. It has enabled me to be able to face difficulty, and not being afraid of taking risks, and be willing to fail again. I mean, I think that's all I can say, really. I mean, I don't think I can give advice, to other people, because in that respect, because the circumstances of everyone's life and environment are very different. But
Hmm.
I think if you are optimistic about the future, if you are surrounded by people who love you, then I think you can find a path to solve these kind of problems, and that's
So
what worked for me.
well, I am very agreeable with you. I mean, having talked to a lot of people who come on this show, some of the virtues that you just walked us through are extremely important when it comes to overcoming difficulty, right? You talked about optimism, and you talked about the family support and the structure, and how important that can be, and obviously the idea of persistence, and how being resilient and being persistent about your ideas eventually gets you to the place you want to go. And that's really is the idea of this show, is to unpack those fundamental ideas that most of us probably are aware of, but don't realize how much tools they can be, and what beautiful tools they are in helping us being able to overcome difficulty and to overcome doubt, which is even tougher. As an immigrant, walk us through the process of having migrated to the US. was some of the struggles that you had to be able to get into your field, and how did you overcome that, and where you at now, what's really driving you?
Yeah, so as I said, I mean, I finished my PhD and my medical residency, and I wanted to learn how to do research a bit better because at the time when I was doing my PhD, this was back in Spain. The resources were not there for me to actually learn, how to do research appropriately. And I wanted to go to the States. I had the opportunity to go to the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis, in the Twin Cities, and I spent there 4.5 years. I just married my wife, and so we both took a couple of suitcases just the day after we got married. We had nothing else. We went to New York for a honeymoon. We actually got married in New York, and then we flew to Minneapolis. I had taken English lessons, but my English was very raw, and it was very difficult to actually communicate. And I remember being afraid of picking up the phone when it rang because I wouldn't be able to understand a thing, and I felt like no, it was really challenging. And I'm sure that everybody um, who comes to a different culture, different language speaking country experiences some of the same things. And then my wife had to go back because she had a job, and she couldn't finish that job. So we spent the first 6 months of our married life away from one another, and I was living with roommates whom I didn't know, and it was an interesting experience, to be honest with you. I mean, uh, and kind of enjoyed that. I enjoyed being in a different culture, learning different ways of doing things, and I was amused by the cultural differences. I felt them exciting. I mean, uh, sometimes it was you felt that you were a fish out of water, but that period of adaptation was kind of invigorating for me, reinvigorating. So I enjoyed that, and then it was. I experienced my challenges. That where do you buy groceries? I remember walking to the grocery store with plastic bags. I didn't have a car, and I had to walk long distances because in the United States, as you know, the cities are not built for people who walk. They're built for cars. And then in the winter it was extremely cold, so I had to adapt to that as well, with lots of snow. And then I moved to. It wasn't cold enough in Minneapolis, so I decided to move further up north to Calgary, and I'm just kidding. To Canada, I had the opportunity to come here. I thought it would be a good environment for me to develop my own independent research career, um, and a place where I could grow up, my family, place that I thought was safe. It was beautiful outside, and so the whole I paid attention to all these sort of considerations, not just the scientific ones, and I've been here ever since, and so I think I've been fortunate to be here, and I think it's been an environment good for me and for my family.
Fantastic. Thank you for walking us through that, because that's really, really important. And most people that are immigrants can relate to your story. Dr. Pere Santamaria, if I may start digging into some of your work, you have said that um, bacteria in our bodies has all sorts of kind of positive effects. Now, before we get into why you believe that, let's look at what microbiome is, and how microbiome and gut microbiome intersect. A few years ago, my beautiful son was bitten by a tick, and he developed a deficiency that was affecting his brain function. And part of the treatment regimen was trying to figure out what was working well for his gut. And so I kind of dug into that world of gut microbiome and how it affects your brain functionality and the rest of your body. Walk us through a basic understanding of what's gut microbiome and how does that relate to bacteria and how does it affect our bodies?
Well, I mean, I'm not an expert on the gut microbiome. I mean, I do work on it, but and so the gut microbiome is basically a collection of billions of different microbes that live in our guts, in our large intestine as well as small intestine, and they provide a myriad of functions that are beneficial to the host, to our body. I mean, some of the functions involve digesting foods that we cannot digest, if we didn't have these gut bacteria living with us. And then they also play a critical role in helping the immune system become fully functional. If we didn't have a gut microbiome, we would have a dysfunctional immune system. And so now the alterations in the composition of gut microbiome, meaning the equilibria, among the many different types of bacteria that live in our gut, alterations of that equilibria will have an impact on having associated with a number of diseases, including autoimmune diseases, where I work, but also diseases that are not necessarily autoimmune in nature, such as, for example, autism, and as well as others. And so it's now highly appreciated. Something that was not appreciated many years ago, but in the last 2 decades, there has been an explosion of work that has demonstrated that the gut microbiome is actually an essential component of who we are. I mean, it's a symbiotic relationship between microbes and ourselves, and we provide the microbes with a place to live, and we provide the microbes with food, and then they provide us with functions that our body cannot accommodate by itself. And with regards to the effects of you're referring to your son. I mean, I do not know what disease he had, but maybe you're referring to Lyme disease. I don't know if he was
Yes,
bitten by
yes,
a tick, and so
bitten by a tick.
yeah. So Lyme disease is it's caused by a spirochete. I mean, it's a type of pathogen that lives in the tick, and then when the tick bites, it infects the host, and then the host mounts, reacts to that infection in many different ways. In some people, nothing happens. In some people develop joint problems like joint inflammation and arthritis, which can be very severe. Some other people develop some brain disease, so it can be diverse. The symptomatology and the signs of disease can be quite diverse, but it's a little different than the what I was referring to about the microbiota. The microbiota is basically a collection of healthy bugs that live with us, but in that case, in the tick case, for your son, it's a pathogen. It's something that doesn't live within us, but it lives within ticks in this case, and then they infect us, and they cause harm.
Fantastic, fantastic. I like how you explained that. Dr. Pere, what role has your multicultural background played in your approach to problem solving and thinking about global health issues such as your field of immune diseases?
Yeah, I mean, having a different, sort of a multicultural background, I think is enriching. It, you know, but at the same time, it can be a challenge as well. I mean, today when I was walking to work, before talking to you, I was thinking about that. I thought, gee, I mean, you are born and grow up in a place where people have a different, particular way of behaving, right? I mean, you walk into an elevator and everybody says hi, and then when people leave the elevator, they say goodbye. That's where I grew up. But in other communities or in other cultures, that doesn't happen. And for example, I remember, when I went to the States, people walk into the elevator, they look down and to the floor. They don't say anything to you when they walk in or when they walk out. And initially, I thought, gee, that's rude. I mean, that didn't feel very well. And then now I realize that I do that myself as well. And when I go back home, it kind of feels odd to say hi and bye bye to people whom you don't really know,
Yeah.
So these little subtle things can be difficult to adjust to, but they also provides you perspective, right? And
Yes.
I just mentioned something very small, right? Walking into an elevator or exiting the elevator, but this can be you can extend that to many other facets of life, like when you go buy when you want to go buy a car, for example, right? The way to approach the salesman is very different in different cultures, or the way when you are upset about something, right? In different cultures, people will react differently, right? I mean, I could become very explicit about my emotions, whereas in other cultures, emotions should be kept to oneself, right? I mean, and so adjusting to all of this is very difficult. It's difficult, but it gives you, it makes you better, right? Because then I think it helps you appreciate people from other cultures when you interact with them, right? And so and I think that's really important, right? Because I mean, in this day and age, the world is just one big place, right? It's no longer you know isolated silos. I mean, we communicate so widely with everyone that I think it's really important to be able to understand other cultures and the way other people behave, feel, and so on and so forth.
Uh, I find it really interesting that when immigrants are migrating, they don't think really much about what they will eat. Mostly, they just assume I'm migrating to one place and I'm gonna eat whatever people in that culture are eating, and that's okay. But in my discovery, in the context of migration, what I have discovered is that the foods that you're eating in your home country sometimes will change, and as those change, your gut microbiome may change. What impact or implications does this have for the immune systems of a migrant?
Well, I mean, so the with regards to autoimmunity, for example, we know that there is sort of a north to south gradient in terms of prevalence of autoimmune diseases. So the further up north that you live in the world, right? I mean, the northern latitudes, the higher the prevalence of autoimmune diseases is, and the further south, southern latitudes, the lower the incidence is or prevalence is, and it's been postulated that this has relates to hygiene, right? And hygiene in the broadest sense, right? I mean, people being able, or kids when they are born, eating mud and eating, not eating, but being exposed to your environment and eating with dirty hands and all that, that protects you against autoimmunity. Whereas if you live in a super clean environment where everything is super clean, so to speak, and you are not exposed as frequently to pathogens or other substances in the environment, that makes you more predisposed to developing autoimmune diseases, provided that you have a genetic makeup that affords you an increased susceptibility. So that's we think that that's related to changes in the microbiome and the way our immune system is educated. So remember, our immune system exists in our body because it wants to protect us against any possible pathogen that might arise in the environment without the immune system knowing what that pathogen would look like. And so the risks of having an immune system, I mean, of course, the benefits are obvious. We don't develop infections, we can live long lives, and the immune system protects us against cancer. But the risk of having an immune system is that sometimes the immune system will overreact, right? And the overreaction may impact our own self tissues, causing autoimmune disease, right? Attacks of the immune system against your muscles or your eyes or your kidney or your liver and so on and so forth. And so, if the gut microbiome is altered because of this sort of inadequate exposures to environmental agents, right? As you're growing up, the immune system will not be properly educated, and therefore the immune system in adult life will be, not in the appropriate equilibrium, so as to be able to do these functions, be able to protect you against cancer and infections, and at the same time not attack your own tissues. So for people who actually are immigrants, such as myself, I don't think you need to worry about the food that you eat so much, but rather to continue to do the sort of the same things that you did in your home country, things that you feel comfortable with. Changing the food, of course, if you go to McDonald's every day, that's going to have other consequences, such as, for example, become obese, and that will carry other consequences in terms of health. But I wouldn't worry too much about the microbiome, and in the adult life, your immune system has already been educated to for the most part.
Fantastic. Immigrants across the globe, we are so glad that you joined us today at the Immigrant Nation podcast. We have the honor to speak with Dr. Pere Santamaria, founder of Perverse Therapeutics. Dr. Santamaria is at the forefront of groundbreaking research in autoimmune diseases, conditions where the body's immune system mistakenly attacks cell. His team has combined nanotechnology with immunological insights to develop a revolutionary approach that blocks harmful autoimmune responses. Dr. Santamaria, please tell our listeners where they can find you on social media.
To be honest with you, I don't use social media. I don't have Facebook. I don't have LinkedIn. I don't tweet. And I do that on purpose because I it's just my way of communication of science is through publications, peer-reviewed publications in the scientific literature, and also I'll give the lay lectures about the work and so. But I mean, if people want to contact me, they can do that through email. And if I can offer a positive response or there are questions that I can answer, then I'll reply to them. And so I'm happy to provide you with my email address, my email if you want, or I can do it now. I mean, if you want.
Okay, we'll grab your email at the very end. That way my team can also go ahead and plug it in. Talking about email, do you see any specific trends between migration, changes in diet, environment, or microbiome, and the onset of autoimmune disorders?
Yes, I mean, to some extent, yes, but it is known that people the prevalence of autoimmune diseases of people who migrate from a latitude where the prevalence is low and they go to a latitude where the prevalence is high, the first generations are probably not impacted as much as subsequent generations, and that has to do with genetic makeup as well, right? So autoimmune diseases are not just driven by environmental triggers. There needs to be a particular combination of normal variants of genes in your genome, in your genetic makeup, that give you a little bit more an increased susceptibility to autoimmunity. This combination of normal variants, they probably have evolutionary advantages for the host, so they are good to have. But sometimes, if you transplant that genetic makeup from one place to another place where the environment changes, for example, the microbiome, then that could elicit autoimmunity. However, it's a complex interaction, so it's not as simple as the microbiome, or it's not as simple as just genetics. It's a combination of the two. So it's kind of hard to develop autoimmunity in a way, right? I mean, it's gotta you have to have an unlucky combination of genes and being in the right place at the right time, so to speak.
Your study, I was reading one of your studies, and I found this one to be really fascinating. You were highlighting the connection between the gut microbiome and autoimmune disorders like IBD and diabetes. How do you see this new discovery potentially changing the way we treat these conditions, particularly in populations with diverse microbiomes due to migration or skin pigment, and on and on?
Well, I mean, in terms of the gut microbiome plays, or bacteria play a really important role in inflammatory bowel disease. Inflammatory bowel disease are disease. There's two general conditions called ulcerative colitis, which causes inflammation of the large intestine, and then another disease which is called Crohn's disease, which selectively causes inflammation in the terminal distal end of your small gut. And those diseases are very severe and devastating and require chronic treatment. And they are caused by an overreaction of the immune system against the gut bacteria, so normal components of the gut bacteria. And so, I mean, we at Parvus, in collaboration with our partners, are developing nanomedicines to actually treat those diseases, harnessing the gut microbiome as a way to reprogram the immune system in these conditions. And so, I mean, that's what I can say about this. In terms of diabetes, there is a clear relationship between the gut microbiome and diabetes susceptibility, but I think I can make that link with other autoimmune diseases as well. But again, insisting, I mean, that is not the trigger. It's not the only trigger. There is a combination of factors that need to align themselves into place for autoimmunity to develop.
Are those factors present in both type 2 and type 1 diabetes?
Well, I mean, the type 2 and type 1 diabetes are very different diseases. Type 1 diabetes, it is an autoimmune disease, so it's caused by an attack of the immune system against the cells of the pancreas that make insulin. So they're called pancreatic beta cells. So these little clusters of cells that whose job is to just produce insulin to actually be able to take sugar from the blood and put it into muscle, put it into brain, and so on. So if you don't have insulin, because the cells that make it have been killed by the immune system, then sugar stays in the circulation, and that creates toxic effects. Now, type 2 diabetes is not an autoimmune disease. Type 2 diabetes is actually a disease where the cells that make insulin are actually resistant to sensing glucose in the environment. So the glucose keeps rising until that sort of cell that's supposed to make insulin wakes up, right? So it's kind of sort of sleepy beta cell, or a sleepy cell that makes insulin, just doesn't wake up when there is a lot of sugar in the bloodstream. And so it's more of a genetic disease, type 2 diabetes. I mean, it's if you have it in your family, you have a higher likelihood that your children will develop, or they have an increased likelihood of developing it. Of course, and it's related to obesity. So if you are obese, then the higher the likelihood, if you have the right genetic makeup, to develop type 2 diabetes in your adulthood. But there are different, very different diseases, and they are both affected by compositions of the gut microbiome. But these relationships are sort of not fully understood to this day.
You talked about collaboration earlier, and looking at your of works, we realized that you've collaborated internationally and locally on microbiome research. What has been the most rewarding aspects of working across borderlines, and what differences in research approaches have you observed globally?
Right. I mean, so the scientific community this day, I mean, this day and age, I mean, you have to collaborate with people who actually are experts in areas that are of interest to your work, but where you lack a certain depth of knowledge. Right. I mean, we're all specialists in the things that we're interested in, and we've developed, expertise and know-how that is very unique to us. We develop tools that are very unique to our work, but then there are other colleagues that have developed tools that you don't have. They have know-how that you don't have, and so that's why we collaborate, and it's an essential centerpiece of the research enterprise. If you don't collaborate, you cannot make efficient progress. And so, you know, collaborating with people who actually know certain things more than you do is enriching. You learn new things. You don't become sort of entrenched into your own, biased thinking. Sometimes working with other people makes you change the way you perceive a particular problem in health that you want to work on. And so it's enriching, and you have to work. I mean, you work with collaborators where they exist. I mean, and you'll find people who actually know more than you everywhere in the world. And so you reach out and says, listen, are you interested in collaborating? I'm interested in this particular problem. I've discovered this, that, and the other, but I see that you have developed this tool. Would you be willing to share it with me? Can you help me address this question? And then you work with them. And as I said, it's super, super important, and it helps you make a much faster progress than you would on your own.
Of course, of course. Let me prick your thinking a little bit. You obviously have had a lot of success in collaboration. If you had the opportunity to speak to a group of grad students that are getting ready to go out into the world and impact the world with their knowledge, what would you how would you speak to them in regard to collaboration in the future?
Well, I would say that I mean, if, to grad students. I mean, people who are interested in doing research, and they want to develop a career in research. The first thing that I would tell them is you know just just follow your instincts. I mean, follow what your sort of scientific inclination uh, suggests you to do. Don't try to chase other people's ideas necessarily. Don't try to be a lemming. I mean, try to be yourself. And then the beginnings will be challenging because of course you're young, you don't know what lies ahead. You will make some mistakes, which is fine because they teach you and you learn from them. So accept failure, but keep following your instincts, because if you chase other people's work, you will never be able to catch up. I mean, other people will always know more than you. But if you you trust your own instincts and you follow your own ideas, yes, you may not always succeed, but you may have a chance of discovering things that others have not discovered, and then that's what a scientist really should do. A scientist should not be here just to replicate or to confirm necessarily what others have already discovered, but to try to discover new things. And if there is no risk taking, there is not going to be any success, at the end of, I mean, success in the sense of helping human beings, right? Helping your your peers, right? I mean, so that's what I would say. I mean, just be willing to take risks. Do not be necessarily, do not be afraid too much. I mean, you have to be a little bit afraid of risk, of course, but do not let that overtake you, and keep chasing your instincts. I mean, because those instincts make you unique, and I think in science, if you want to be successful, you have to try to be unique in your own way, not by force, but by following your own gut feeling, right, so to speak. Now that we're talking about microbiome, gut feeling.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So, with more attention being given to the importance of microbiome globally, do you see any unique challenges or opportunities? And really talking to immigrant students that may be listening at this point, in researching the gut microbiome across different cultures or geographical populations.
I mean, you're asking about the challenges or opportunities
Both
or
challenges and
both
opportunities.
opportunities. Well, for the challenges are that the gut microbiome is extremely complex. I mean, billions of different bugs live in our gut. To be able to dissect the role of those bugs is of course challenging, because it's like finding needles in huge haystacks. Um, it's important to have the adequate facilities and colleagues around that can support that research. For example, here at the University of Calgary, we have an international microbiome facility, which basically they house mice that don't have a gut microbiome, and they can actually repopulate or reconstitute the gut of those mice with unique bacteria, right? I mean, instead of billions of different ones, with just one that is isolated, grown in the laboratory, and then put back into animals that are called germ-free, right? So they have no germs in the gut. And so, to be able to have access to these animal models, right, where you can manipulate the gut microbiome is priceless, and that certainly helped my work. And as I said, there are people here in my institution that are focused exclusively on working on the gut microbiome and its impact on different types of diseases, not just autoimmune in nature, but other types, such as autism, for example. And so that's a challenge. One of the challenges, to have appropriate know-how around you, to be able to have facilities that are extraordinarily expensive to generate an upkeep, because to keep animals germ-free is not trivial. And so they have to be completely isolated from the environment. And then, in terms of opportunities, the opportunities, I think, are going to be endless. Because there is so much complexity in the gut microbiome, so much to learn about that. That good ideas will lead to good, excellent discoveries in that space. The other challenge, now that I'm talking about that, is that there are a lot of investigators working on the gut microbiome, so competition is extremely high, and so collaborating with people who may need your expertise will be an asset to your own work as well. So that's what I would say.
So, walk us through understanding the red blood cells and, on the flip side of it, the white blood cells. Because in some people, the white blood cells overreact to the presence of IBD bacteria. This is what may cause problems like IBD. It's not the bacteria itself, but the immune system severe reaction triggered by the protein. Um, how should we look at or interpret this science, and what should we be aware of when it comes to the role of white blood cells?
Right. So I mean, the so the white blood cells. So the immune system. I mean, we call them white blood cells because the cells that make up the immune system. They don't live in a particular place in the body. They go around. They travel. You know, through the body, through the circulation, the blood circulation, and they do that because they function like the police in our body. So they go around. Now they check the kidney, check the liver, check the pancreas, and make sure that everything is in order. They go take a look and they leave. It's like the police, right? And they are kind of they're white blood cell because under they call them white blood cells because you have in blood you have the red blood cells which are red and the white blood cells which under the microscope they look white. And what happens with the white blood cells in an individual who has an sort of an unlucky combination, as I mentioned before, of genes or variants of genes that are normal, but that they increase the likelihood of you developing a particular autoimmune disease if the appropriate environmental trigger is available. Then those individuals will not necessarily develop that autoimmune disease, right? They may never develop that autoimmune disease through their life. But under certain circumstances, they may develop that autoimmune disease. And so what happens, there is a trigger, and that trigger is not well understood. What the triggers, we know some triggers, but we certainly only know the tip of the iceberg but of the collection of triggers that can cause autoimmunity or trigger autoimmunity. Now, those triggers will then elicit the activation of those white blood cells, so they make them go haywire, and then those white blood cells will orchestrate a response, a very sophisticated response against, in this case, when we're talking about IBD, the gut tissues, right? So they perceive the gut bacteria as if they are pathogens. So there's like, they are supposed not to touch the gut bacteria. This sort of because they provide essential functions for our survival. And instead of not touching them, they actually, white blood cells go into the gut and start, becoming, highly activated in the presence of those gut bacterial antigens, and then they secrete mediators that destroy the lining of your gut, and that creates ulcers, bleeding, diarrhea, and all the complications, all the signs of inflammatory bowel disease. And then once the immune system has decided to attack your tissues, in this case the gut, they will do that for the rest of your life. They will not cease to want to do it, and to stop them from doing it will require, significant treatments, which are very costly, and will, to this day, I mean, the treatments that are available will not only suppress that particular autoimmune disease, but also the rest of the immune system, and will make you a little bit more susceptible to infections and more susceptible to cancer in the long run. So this is the sort of the relationship between the immune system, or the white blood cells of the immune system, and the genetic makeup, as well as the environmental triggers that awaken that sort of dormant immune system that wants to harm you.
Immigrants across the globe, if you are joining us, we are excited that you are joining us. We are speaking with Dr. Pere Santamaria of University of Calgary. Dr. Santamaria, please walk me through to understanding how nervous system works and the process of discovery.
Right. So nervous systems were discovered. I mean, and that relates to what I was saying earlier about risk taking, following your instincts, as opposed to trying to chase the same sort of goals that others chase. I mean, I was, this was in the early 2000s. I was doing my research. I was interested in autoimmune disease. I was working on type 1 diabetes in mice, trying to understand how white blood cells decide to attack the cells of the body that make insulin. And so I had made my tools to study a particular problem that I was interested in. It was instinctive. I mean, I wanted to study that problem, and then without getting into the details, one day we were doing some experiments that were sort of a little bit on the edge, just trying to play with an idea that was not a core, a core piece of work in my lab. It was sort of a peripheral, we'll have some fun type of thing. And we obtained some very counterintuitive results. I mean, results that didn't make any sense. I mean, from what I knew at the time. Um, and I decided, for maybe a day or so, I said, forget it. I'm just going to move on to the things that work in the lab and forget about these observations that I couldn't understand. But then I thought about it for another couple of days, and I said to myself, okay, if I make these assumptions, if I assume that this is happening, and if I assume that this other thing is happening, then maybe I can understand this sort of a strange outcome that I saw. And at that moment, I became excited. I mean, and I said, Jesus, if this is true, then if these assumptions are true, then maybe I'm onto something important. And so Navacims were discovered this way. I mean, not because I was looking for them, but because I ran into them. It's not that I had this great idea that I'm going to develop a drug that is going to do what this drug does. I mean, it's just I had the drug by luck that we built to do something different, that gave me weird results that then I decided to chase. And I decided to chase those results at risk. I understood that the chances of failure were very high, but at the same time, my instinct was telling me that I had to pursue that, and I decided to do that. And so that's why I was saying to you earlier that I advise people to follow their advice, their instincts, because sometimes your instincts are more powerful than your conscience. I mean, you have the things that you're conscious about, which are informed by the culture and things that you are aware, but then your subconscious mind is magic. I mean, it perceives it senses things around the environment that you're not even aware of, and it guides you. And so let that instinct guide you, and then yes, you may fail, but you may succeed. And so that's where Navacims were born. And then the way they work is fascinating. I mean, I've spent the last close to 20 years trying to understand in great detail how they work, and I've learned so much about the immune system. And I've been surprised so many times, about the mechanisms, and now we understand exactly how they work really, really well. And sometimes I pinch myself, because if I had to design something to do what these drugs do, I would not have ever been able to do it. It's just impossible, because you wouldn't have been able to guess. It's so serendipity.
Yes.
And using your instincts to be able to follow to be able to accept serendipity, accept risk, can actually allow you to be successful. But remember, they can also make you miserable, and they can also make you fail. But I think if you accept failure, then I think you are at peace with that. And so that's the way I approach things.
That's fascinating. So serendipity for me, fate and luck all collide and manifest to those who are prepared and ready. Because if you're not prepared and ready, the realization of what you're playing with may not be available to those who the knowledge may reveal may reveal itself to those who are participating. You talked about instinct, and so I like the English language because words have power and they have meaning. So is instinct trained or is it developed over time?
I think both. I mean, I think well, and I think it's also innate. Um, I mean, to me, I could be wrong, right? But I think you are born with a particular makeup, right? I mean, what nature gives you,
Mhm.
and what nature gives you is a way to perceive your environment and collect information from the stimuli that you receive as you from the time you are born till the time you die, right? So you collect that information. Your brain processes that information in different ways. Uh, I don't know how it does it, but obviously does it. And so uh, there is the information or the inputs that you get, but also you know the way you are wired to be able to to sense that information. And there are people who can sense things, and there are people who cannot sense the same things that you do, right? And we're all different, and we sense different things. And so and so there is, I think there is an innate aspect of it, but then there is also the type of inputs that you receive, right? In my case, right, the inputs that I received was I got very sick when I was 15 years old, at the time in my life where not being able to function as an adolescent had a profound impact on my happiness and the way I saw the world around me. And so that probably informed my instinct. It made my instinct more resilient. It made me a little bit more fearless. It made me a little bit more resistant to failure, right? Or the sense of failure. I had experienced failure. I knew what it felt like. I was less afraid of re-encountering failure, um, as opposed to somebody who's always successful and then fails. I mean, that feeling must be very different. So I'm sure that all of these informed my sort of way of reacting to a particular circumstance in my life. And so in my career, that day when, or those 3 days when I made those assumptions, I had the serendipitous observations, I made those assumptions, and how I reacted to those assumptions were probably a consequence of everything that I said to you before. Probably a consequence of my previous problems, how I dealt with those problems in my adolescence, my and a certain innate ability to maybe be able to think those problems through, right, and be able to say, okay, I'm going to chase that, right. uh, so I think it's both. I think it's trained, but it's also innate.
Very fascinating. Very fascinating. So, what is your team working on currently?
Well, I mean, so there is the academic part of research, which is what we do at university, which involves asking questions about particular mechanisms. So I'm very very interested in understanding how navacims work at the molecular level. I mean, they do these magic things where they reprogram certain white cells of the immune system that want to cause autoimmune disease. They reprogram them into other types of white blood cells that actually protect you against autoimmune disease. And so that conversion of cells from one type to another is very sophisticated at the genetic as well as epigenetic level. And so my laboratories are trying to understand you know what are the sequential changes that occur in those white blood cells as they convert from one type to the other. And we're discovering things that we find fascinating. And then what this does, it exposes potentially new targets for therapeutic intervention, right? So there are new switches that you discover in the immune system that could be manipulated with new drugs. And then there is the drug development side, which is what Parvus Therapeutics does. I mean, one thing is to discover a particular new class of drugs and be able to make small amounts in your laboratory to treat mice. The other thing is to produce those drugs at scale, and to make them commercially viable, right? So you can actually make, tons of them, of the material, in the appropriate with the appropriate quality, so that they could be tested in clinical trials and eventually make them available to patients if those clinical trials are successful. And that enterprise is so challenging and so difficult, and there is a whole host of other people who work in industry who have expertise, unique expertise that we in academia do not have. And so to go from academia to industry and be able to translate basic discoveries is super, super, super challenging. I never thought it would be that difficult, and enormously expensive as well. So yeah. My area of expertise is academic, is basic understanding of things, how the things work. But then there is all these other people that I work with who have expertise. They know, they're engineers, they're business people. They know how to scale things up, make them better, and then they know how to test them in clinical trials, right? Which is another world. And there are some people who know how to raise money to be able to do all this work. And so that's what we're trying to do. So as of last week, we started clinical trials in healthy volunteers with Navasims. So Parvus Therapeutics is now a clinical company. It's been a long time, but as I said, it's been really difficult to learn how to make the drug at scale, learn how to do it properly, and so my colleagues at Parvus have done a phenomenal job at overcoming those challenges, and now we'll see what happens. But we're getting closer.
Fantastic, fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, we are speaking with the amazing Dr. Pere Santa Maria. He was born in Manresa, Spain, located near Barcelona, from a very humble background. For the first 5 years of his life, he lived with his parents and grandparents in a very small farmhouse, collecting butterflies in the summer, and was curious, learning very early on that the surrounding and his environment had beautiful things, and in that he was able to overcome his sickness. And it's through that discovery that he has ended up becoming one of the pioneers in finding what may be potentially solutions for type 1 diabetes through his invention for nervosism. Dr. Perry, we want to be respectful of your time. Tell us how we can get a hold of you on email, and if you have a few last words for our listeners.
Well, people can reach me through my email at University of Calgary. So it's I'm sure if you Google, you'll be able to find it. It's also listed in my publications, but it's psantama at ucalgary.ca. Again, psantama at ucalgary.ca. And you're welcome to write to me, and again, if I can offer any insights to your questions, I will respond. Now, about my last words, no, I just want to thank you, Martin, for your excellent questions. Around my personal feelings about things, culture. Being an immigrant myself, and what my experiences have been, and so on. You've also probed my scientific work, and so if my experiences can help other people, in their life, that would be fantastic. My experiences are only my experiences. I'm sure that my challenges are just a fraction of what other people experience in life. But I think sometimes what I would like to say is that setbacks, I don't want to have setbacks, right? Nobody wants to have setbacks, but sometimes setbacks can actually make you better in the long run. It can help you overcome the future setbacks that we for sure we will endure, right? I mean, life is full of surprises and challenges for all of us, and sometimes it is how you face those challenges that determines the outcome, right? And so you can retreat to a corner in your house and be consumed by grief or sense of failure, or you can just accept what's given to you, or what the fate has given you, and then try to overcome that the best the best way you can, and try to be resilient. And I think it's easier said than done, but if you try to do that, I think the chances are that you will overcome faster. So that's what I would like to say.
Fantastic, fantastic. Listen, like I said from the very beginning, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you have a lot going on. First, from the Immigrant Nation podcast, we want to say thank you, thank you for making the time for us. And two, we want to say congratulations. You've done this world a big favor by investing your time, your resources to bring healing to humanity. Before we say goodbye, was there one question you were hoping I would ask you that I have not asked you?
No, I mean you've asked all kinds of questions, and so from all fronts, and I was actually expecting fewer questions. So I think you've covered a lot of ground, and I hope that my answers were useful to your audience.
Thank
So
you.
thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
very much. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome again. Hopefully, one of these fine days we can get together one more time and have a conversation and see what progress you've made and how we at the Immigrant Nation we can join your team and help you become even more successful. Thank you again for your time and welcome next time to the Immigrant Nation podcast.
Thank you very much, Martin.
You. Thank you so very much, Doc. Have a good one.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.